The scale of this is starting to set in. Welcome back to Craft Computing, everyone. As always, I'm Jeff, and today is a very exciting episode. Today we are going over all of the updates that I have for you for Axe Effect, including putting a bunch of them together to get ready for shipping. So the boards finally arrived, and they were only about 4 weeks late. So I ordered the first batch of 300 PCBs in anticipation of being able to ship them right around the week of June 24th, or at least physically taking receipt of them. They made it stateside on June 23rd, entered clearance on June 24th, where they sat for the next 12 days. Now, obviously, this was frustrating for me because I'm wanting to get these boards to start validating them and testing them and flashing them, getting them all assembled, but I'm sure it's also frustrating for you because I told you I'd be shipping or at least updating on June 24th. I will own I didn't send a mass email, and I was told that we were like 1 or 2 days from getting them through customs, like 6 different times, so I didn't want to like send out a mass email and worry everyone that it was going to be a multi-week wait. Just to get the boards the next day or something like that. So, here we are. It is June 12th. The boards finally arrived at like 4 p.m. yesterday. So, let's take a look at what we're working with here. All right. Unit number 1. There we go in all her glory. Very nice. So why all the other boxes? Well, the small box was the beta boards themselves. The next box down is my collection of 3D printed cases. There we go. Oh, yes. Perfect. And last but not least, I ordered, I think, 4,000 M2 by 10 millimeter screws. I've never ordered this many screws before in my life. But I did go with Torx bits, because I like Torx bits. So the plan for this video is I'm just going to spend my time putting some cases together, because this is going to take a while, I'm assuming. And I'm going to answer some of your questions from the first video. There were a number of great questions and suggestions for features, some things that I think need a little bit of clarification, and we'll just kind of go through them. So, without further ado, let's finish screwing this one together, and we'll get to your questions. 1. Before we get too far into this video, we need to talk about today's sponsor, and that's PCBWay. When I finally decided to embark on this project, I knew exactly who I wanted to work with. I actually placed an order for our first validation run of these boards with PCBWay before reaching out to them to see if they would be interested in sponsoring any of these videos. I wanted to walk through the ordering and validation process before agreeing to a sponsorship, as it's a process I had exactly 0 experience with. PCBWay made it simple to upload Gerber files for the PCB layout, as well as taking care of ordering specific components my developer and I had chosen for this design, such as the Raspberry Pi Pico W, as well as the BME 280 temperature sensor. Now, while I'm not scared of a little bit of soldering, I knew it wasn't feasible for me to build this many boards for a full production run, even in the early stages when we were just doing prototyping. PCBWay not only handled manufacturing of the PCB, but also fully assembled and soldered the final boards as well. Of course, they offer a whole host of other services as well, from 3D printing to CNC manufacturing. Services I'll likely be taking advantage of when we produce the full retail version of Axe Effect later this year. Visit PCBWay by following my referral link down in the video description, where you can get a $5 credit as a new user. PCBWay is also celebrating their 10th anniversary and is celebrating with coupons as well as giveaways all throughout the month, so make sure to check back frequently and see what's up. Again, a huge thanks to PCBWay for sponsoring this video and for their work on this project so far. So one of the biggest and most frequently asked questions that I got was, will there be a PoE version, Power over Ethernet wired version? Yes, that was answered in the second half of the video. The Wi-Fi version was a proof of concept for the software stack. This is a beta version to test, could we use SNMP on an RP2040 or some other microcontroller? Could we get a temperature sensor that I'm happy with, that is readily available? What's our parts list going to look like? What's our BOM? What's our software cost? What's our development? That is the whole purpose of this beta board. So the PoE version, this was my plan from the very start, was to make a power over Ethernet enabled temperature sensor. Again, my focus for these is doing a very good quality temperature sensor that you can place into a server rack. There's a million other uses for a high quality temperature sensor, but server deployment is my primary focus here. We are developing our own PoE circuitry. We have a development board of that nearly complete at this point, and we are beginning testing on that. The reason we're developing our own PoE circuit to include on this device is we want to have a wide array of DC power inputs available. We found a DC converter that is a single unit that will do anywhere from 5 to 60 volt DC input. Which means that we can essentially take a 5 volt USB-C, we can take a 5 to 60 volt barrel jack DC, or we can take 24 or 56 volt power over Ethernet and feed it through the exact same power circuitry. We don't have to double up on anything. That means you, as the end user, get a huge array of power options for this board, and we actually get to design a simpler circuit overall. 5. Right now, I know we will be supporting 24 volt passive power over Ethernet. I'm not sure if we will be supporting active profiles yet, though. That will remain to be seen in testing over the next month or so. I hope to have an update for you soon on that, but stay tuned to the channel and make sure you're subscribed for the next update on this project. The next question that I got most frequently was, will you have options for multiple sensors? So on the board, we have a single temperature sensor right here at the tip. And for those that guess, this is a Bosch BME 280. It is a temperature, relative humidity, and pressure sensor. We are focused primarily on the pressure and relative humidity. We may enable the pressure sensor at a later date to function, but that's really going to be up to the user to figure out which metrics are usable and what you actually would need to use the pressure sensor for. Again, I don't know that there's a lot of aspects or metrics that we can use in a server rack environment, so I don't know that I'm going to spend a whole lot of time developing for that. But as far as temperature and humidity, those are definitely worthwhile metrics to have. So this sensor is really, really cool. It is really freaking accurate, and I have been thrilled with what we've gotten out of it so far. Like I said in the first video, they are factory calibrated to be within 0.3 degrees Celsius of accurate. We're also in the final stages of validating version 1.3 of our firmware. I'm currently going over the release candidate for it right now that enables the relative humidity sensor as an option to read off of this over SNMP. But you guys asked about multiple sensors. So the Wi-Fi version, this is pretty close to what I think will be our final design. We will be building our own custom PCB with the RP2040 on it, but probably a very similar form factor to this when the Wi-Fi final model hits the market. But how do you add a second temperature probe, and how do you enable placement within a rack wherever you need it? Well, that is where we kind of switch directions based off a number of user feedback. And we are going to be launching the PoE version that is capable of connecting to 2 sensors at once. That means with a single unit and 2 remote sensor probes, you could have top of rack and bottom of rack, or front of rack and rear of rack, temperature and humidity with the same fidelity as is available on the Axe Effect beta unit here. So how are multiple sensors going to work? Well, like I said, we are developing our own custom PCB for the RP2040 for the power over Ethernet model. That one will have the RJ45 jack on it for power and Ethernet in. There will also be a DC barrel jack, again, like I mentioned, 5 to 60 volt input, as well as the USB-C connection for serial configuration or 5 volt power input if you'd rather use that method. that unit will exist as a brain. There will not actually be a temperature sensor on the main unit. That means that rather than with the AxeFX beta units where you need to place the unit in an air path or wherever you want to read the temperature at, you can place the AxeFX PoE brain unit wherever you want and then place the 2 remote probes, which are much smaller and attached with a cable, in a much more convenient location. We're also looking at the possibility of adding a water contact sensor. That is a sensor that you can place on the floor or in a drip pan for an air conditioning unit and detect if you are accumulating water. Not necessarily the most important thing for most server rooms, but especially for home labs, if you run a system out of a basement or out of a garage, or small, medium businesses. Sometimes you get servers that are set in really weird corners of buildings. Maybe you have an home office that has sump pumps behind it that have a tendency to fail. Yeah, that last feature I might have a vested interest in making sure it comes to fruition. But lots of fun things coming to that, and we hope to have an official announcement sometime in October. Like I said, we are in the mid stages of prototyping that whole system. We're almost done with our PoE and power input circuitry, and after that it's just laying out the RP2040 and the sensors and remote probes and getting to testing. So very exciting there. Now, on the Wi-Fi models, one of the questions that I got was, why are you doing 2.4 gigahertz and not supporting 5 gigahertz? And that one is a straightforward answer that not a lot of people are going to want to hear. 5 gigahertz is great. If I bought a device today and it didn't support 5 gigahertz, I would be furious. But you need to think of 2.4 gigahertz in the context of an IoT device. This is a very low power device, and it has only a single radio, which is 2.4 gigahertz. If we wanted to support 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, that means we would need to install 2 radio modules, which would double our cost. Now, is there a benefit to going with 5 gigahertz? Yes, a lot of businesses, a lot of home offices, a lot of you want to disable 5 gigahertz because it's more secure, you get better passkeys, and you get higher speed. There's a problem with 5 gigahertz though. 5 gigahertz requires more power from the client device, that is this guy here, and 5 gigahertz doesn't have the penetration power at the same power levels that 2.4 gigahertz does. For the beta board, 2.4 gigahertz was frankly our only option. We wanted to go with the RP2040 as a platform, and I'll give some more information on that in just a second. But the Raspberry Pi Pico W only supports a 2.4 gigahertz wireless radio module, likely for a lot of the reasons that I just mentioned. Now, I could support just a 5 gigahertz radio, but that would actually hamper both its indoor and outdoor performance, and might not be in the best interest of placing a remote sensor somewhere. And I think the Wi-Fi units especially are going to get some very unique installation locations. I've had people reach out to me for everything from 3D printer farms so they know the temperature of their enclosures, to putting them out in greenhouses and chicken coops. Reliable Wi-Fi temperature sensors are strangely harder to get than a lot of people might think if you don't want to just use Google Home or Apple Home Device Kit or anything like that. And because this is SNMP based, you can hook it up into Home Assistant or PRTG or anything else and actually log your temperatures over time. That is something that is actually surprisingly difficult to do using live services like Google Home. Now, I already kind of touched on this, but we did have a dedicated question over it, and that is the humidity sensor. Will humidity be supported? Yes, as of the latest release candidate, which is what is shipping on these beta units here, we do have the relative humidity sensor enabled. Now, relative humidity has an inverse relationship to temperature and pressure. It is not an absolute humidity reading, so keep that in mind. 15. Shit, I'm 5% of the way through. Now, the humidity sensor is a little bit different than the temperature sensor when it comes to SNMP. It is still a piece of the entity sensor MIB. However, the OID is not present in the standard entity sensor. It is a custom readout, which means if you want to record humidity, you're going to have to install either a custom template or do an SNMP walk. Now, what that means for long-term use, that means Humidity might be a little bit more difficult to read if your software does not allow you to create custom templates or custom OIDs. Observium, you have to pay for the full version in order to enable custom OIDs. But there are programs like CheckMK that allow you to create custom SNMP walk sensors based on the OID that you are targeting. All right, probably the most repeated question in the last video was, why am I using and why am I developing with the Raspberry Pi Pico, or specifically the RP2040, rather than going with the lovable, classic, go anywhere, do anything, king of the homemaker community, ESP32? What is my beef with the ESP32? I have no beef. This was strictly a development call. When you're developing a product, you determine what it is you want to develop, and then you figure out if there's a platform that exists that you can develop on. In this case, we are developing an SNMP temperature sensor. We need a couple of key features. First up, we need an I2C bus that we can tap into for the temperature sensors. Both platforms have an I2C bus. That's not a problem. Secondly, SNMP is written in C. Now, I don't know if you've ever programmed for an ESP32. I certainly haven't, but my developer has. And he informs me that porting C over to ESP32 is akin to teaching a monkey how to ride a bike. You can do it, but I'm still paying for the developer. And it's not that the ESP32 is a bad platform. It's a very good platform. It's a very accessible platform. It just wasn't the platform I needed for this device in bulk. That, and a number of people said the ESP32 would be cheaper. While yes, the development board is cheaper, I'm only going to be buying the RP2040 chip itself, and then we're building out our own circuits. So no, the ESP32 was not a cheaper overall platform to go to for my development needs. Any plans for Prometheus or MQTT or any other standardized sensor readout utility? I like the idea when developing a product, especially kind of a niche product like this, is to develop it to do one thing and one thing extraordinarily well. I want this to be a fantastic SNMP sensor. To that end, I think we've developed a fantastic SNMP platform and sensor. Now, I'm not saying that Prometheus and MQTT will not come to this platform in the future, but that's not where our development time has been going. Prometheus also has some interesting security things to go along with it, with such a lightweight processor on here in the RP2040, in that to run Prometheus, you have to enable an HTTP server. So there's got to be a web host of some kind running on the device. That is actually a very intentional omission from us. We are doing all of our configuration over serial as to not allow potential compromises to infect this device, essentially turning this IoT device into a botnet or an ingest point into your network. We want this device to be stupid simple. We want it to be single function. If there is a way in the future to incorporate MQTT, Prometheus, or any other of standardized networking monitoring protocols, we will certainly be looking at doing it that. And we won't be charging for any updates if we end up coming out with that. All firmware updates for this are going to remain free forever. If you bought a device, as long as it's supported, you will get the firmware update. But we are being very careful with how we develop, and what we want having access to our system. Any plans for Home Assistant? Again, a lot of people use MQTT for Home Assistant. However, Home Assistant does have a native SNMP client on it, which means you can read this device natively. And in fact, both the temperature and the humidity sensors read natively on this out of the box. You scan the device and you get both sensors popping up just as easy as that. It's literally the easiest operating system to configure this device inside of. Up next, we've got some questions about the case, form factors, etc. So this is the Wi-Fi case for Axe Effect. This is designed to be mounted in a rack either vertically or horizontally, or you can just use one of these mounting holes and screw it into the wall. It is pretty darn solid as is. One of the things that I wanted to do with this case, and honestly just didn't put the time into doing it this revision, is magnetic mounting, is being able to stick this to a server rack somewhere. That is something that will be incorporated in the final versions of the products. For right now, we just wanted to get the sensor out there into your hands and make sure it worked, start doing what we need to in the beta phase of this project. In the future, both the PoE version, the modules for those, the remote sensors, and the Wi-Fi version will all support magnetic mounting, hopefully out of the box. We're hoping to make that a standardized feature across all of the models. Are there any plans for any additional bonus features, such as adding relays, RGB LEDs, audio cues, etc.? That is something that we are toying with a little bit. Again, what I'm trying to do with this is create what I think is the best SNMP temperature sensor on the market and sell it at an affordable price. And especially at the beginning, I don't want to let feature creep drive that price up. Development is expensive. For those who think I'm developing this personally, I've always been an ideas guy, but that's about where my expertise ends. The PCB layout, the coding, all of that is actually being outsourced to an engineer. And I'm working very closely with them, but it's not actually me that's developing it. Because I'm working with a developer, that means I'm paying a developer. And that means every additional feature and every feature creep and every variable that we add to the firmware, every feature that we have to support, is literally going to be multiple thousands of dollars to implement to the final version. What I want this first version to be especially is the best SNMP temperature and humidity sensor that I can build. And if we can build on that in the future, if we can add future features or product support or make new models with features that people are wanting, that is something that's definitely in the cards. For this release model, though, we're honestly keeping it as simple as possible. I do see the potential add-on and value add of a lot of those features. Adding relays so you could add a trip light or a warning siren or something like that. Having a relay able to trip your grow lights or turn on the lights in your greenhouse would absolutely be a cool feature to have. We may develop that in the future, and I'm sure in future models we probably will. We will probably develop more advanced versions of this basic board, but I still want to deliver a very basic board for those who want a low-cost temperature monitoring solution. It's also a question of, since we're building this off the Raspberry Pi Pico, are we going to enable the traces to do whatever people want? At the moment, I am not open sourcing the firmware. I'm not going to allow people to tinker on the firmware. Right now, this is staying strictly a commercial venture. On the beta board, you're more than welcome to just use the Raspberry Pi Pico and ignore my temperature sensor or develop your own. But you're not going to have raw access to modify my firmware. However, in the future development of this board, we are, again, not using the Raspberry Pi Pico, but the RP2040, and we will not have all of the exposed pins, which means expansion from a consumer standpoint is not going to be an option anyway. The main reason for that is actually cost savings. It's cheaper in bulk for us to develop our own board and sell it with an RP2040 on board than rely on sourcing Raspberry Pi Picos to add on to our own custom PCBs. Now, I got a ton of questions on shipping. Why is shipping so expensive? Do you ship to my country? Why is it this amount to ship to my country? International shipping is very expensive. I don't know if anyone's looked into shipping even something that weighs 4 or 5 ounces halfway around the world. It's very expensive, especially for a single unit. My average international shipping cost was like $22. And unfortunately, that's just what the cost of it is. If you go and get a quote, it's somewhere around $18 or $19. And I've added $2.50 for packing materials because I also need to include a box, a shipping envelope, labels, business card, so you can get the link to our GitHub page. All of that stuff, that all needs to be included in every single thing that I add inside of a package and used as packaging material goes into cost. So $17 plus, $3 or $4, $21 just to ship this thing to Germany or even to Canada. Now that said, bulk shipping is much less expensive. A couple people have ordered 8 sensors, and the price of shipping has only gone up from like $20 to somewhere around $35 or $40. I think the most expensive bulk order that I did was 10 units, and it was $52, and that was to Australia. So this is one of those, the more you buy, the more you save. And if you are interested in bulk orders in the future for the full retail release, certainly get in touch with me. I'd be more than happy to give custom quotes, bulk discounts, etc. But I'm still a business. I still need to make money, and unfortunately I need to pass the shipping charges on to you. And it just is what it is. And I've got 2 questions left. One of them is, why the name Axe Effect? And I'm going to be completely honest with you all. When I proposed this project to the engineer that I'm working with, he goes, do you have a name for this project yet? And I said, I have no idea. And he goes, well, I'm just going to put it into a name generator that AI generates project names. I'm going to give it a couple criteria, and I'm going to let it spit out a name. And the name that it spat out was Axe Effect. I have no idea why, but that's the name that was generated. When we got to talking about the development of the Wi-Fi model, I mentioned that I want to base this off the RP2040. We'll probably use a Pico dev board for the initial model, and I want the sensor to have some distance between it and the internals as to not cause any heat bleed. And so this was the design of the circuit board that ended up coming out of that, which looks like an axe. It looks like a guitar. So the name kind of stuck. Is Axe Effect the permanent name? I don't know. It was a great working name. I'm not sure it really explains what the product is, but I needed a name to give the project so my engineer could keep track of what the project was, and so we didn't just call it the temperature sensor. If you all have any ideas for a name, and yes, I'm asking you for free advice, which I will probably end up trademarking later on, let me know down in the comments below. What would be a great name for this product? I like the name Axe Effect. I don't really ever want to get into a legal battle with Fractal Audio or Axe Deodorant, both of which have had Axe FX or Axe Effect as names, although this is clearly never a product that's going to be confused with any of those companies. So I'm not really worried about that, especially in these early phases. But if you guys have any name ideas, let me know in the comments below. That is number 29. I am 1 away from being 10% done. So last but not least, what are some of the future ideas I have for this project? I'm not going to share all of them with you. Obviously, I am still a business and want to keep some of this close to my vest, but I do have some ideas for future products. If the PoE version is a success, I envision potentially making a product for data centers, where if you wanted low, mid, and high temperature sensors, both front and rear of rack. That is a brain unit that will take up to 6 temperature inputs. That is certainly a product that we could develop. I think it's certainly possible with the platform and with the engineering we've already done on it. Plus, with our units, it would be incredibly accurate temperature and humidity monitoring for those 6 different locations. So maybe sometime in the future, you'll see up to 6 remote units off of a single brain. Intrusion detection would be a great one. So if you have a locked server rack, the ability to add a momentary switch and detect intrusion and send trap alerts to your SNMP monitor software to detect if a rack door opened. That is certainly something that we could add to this platform as well. I've also looked at the possibility of adding an air quality sensor, particularly for the Wi-Fi version. I'm not super concerned with the PoE version, but for Wi-Fi, if this ends up being deployed in agricultural settings, like I said, chicken coops and greenhouses and grow houses and all that kind of thing, air quality could certainly be something that you wanted to keep an eye on. So replacing our BME 280 with a BME 680 and getting an air quality counter on there, that might be something we look at in the future as well. As far as what else you guys want to see in here, that's kind of up to you. I'm always open to suggestions on what do you want this to be, because well, like I said, I have some very specific goals for this project in mind. Ultimately, I'm trying to sell this product to you. So if you have any additional ideas, features that you'd like to see, design modifications, or something that I didn't cover in this video, please leave it down in the comment section below, and maybe I'll do another Q&A here before too long. And I said that was final, but I do have one final thing to say, and that is, if you ordered an Axe Effect unit, where are we at for shipping? Well, obviously, I just got the units in, and I am working on assembling them today, and this is the first 32 units that it's sitting on my desk right now. I have 300 units on hand right now. I ordered another 120. Those should be here within the next couple of weeks or so. I know it's 3 weeks later than I said, but that's what happens when you spend 12 days in Los Angeles Customs and then spend another 6 days trying to get from Los Angeles to Portland. It was a whole thing. But I'm going to be spending the rest of this weekend getting everything assembled, and then we are going to be flashing all of these and letting probably up to 100 of them do burn-in tests. Sit here and just record temperature and make sure they're all within variance. I'm not going to test every single unit, but every single unit will get the current firmware flashed to it. That means my computer is going to have something like 450 COM ports by the time this is all said and done, but we'll have to figure that out. On your way down to the comment section, make sure to drop this video a like and subscribe to Craft Computing if you haven't done so already. And head on over to craftcomputing.store, where you can find one of my fantastic laser engraved pint glasses made and designed right here in-house by me. That's going to do it for me in this one. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Cheers, everyone. I really need an electric screwdriver. Beer for today is from Treehouse Brewing. This is Real Sticky, and it was sent over from longtime supporter of the channel, John J. So cheers to you, John. This one, I guarantee, was sent for a very specific reason. One of my favorite beers is a local brew from Level 15 in Corvallis, Oregon. It is called Sticky Hands. It is a beer I am intimately familiar with, and John J. has received a couple bottles from me as well. This is supposed to be the East Coast equivalent of Sticky Hands. Let's see how it holds up. First impressions, pretty good. Real Sticky. We dug deep in the archives, all the way back to Curiosity 15 to inspire this beer. Featuring High Oil, Cascade, Chinook, Columbus, and Centennial, Real Sticky is a vintage dank American IPA that makes no apologies as it coats your palate with sticky hop goodness. Real Sticky pours a beautiful clean orange color into your glass. It carries notes of pineapple, orange juice, pine, and sticky cannabis with a firm but ephemeral bitterness. Crisp, crushable, and resinous. This is a beautiful beer. Oh, hot damn, that's good. Treehouse Real Sticky. This is such a good beer. And this is an advanced IPA drinker's beer. This is hardcore dank. I'm really surprised that Treehouse went as far as saying sticky cannabis in the description of this beer. We all know that hops and cannabis are part of the same flowering family, but cannabis is kind of a dirty word in the beer industry. Those two industries don't get along all that well, nor do consumers who are hardcore anti-drug really like seeing cannabis on any product whatsoever. So to call it out as a distinct flavor profile, you got balls, Treehouse. That being said, that's one of the most apt descriptions of this beer. Sticky Hands from Block 15 is one of my favorite all-time IPAs. Because it is that unabashedly flower, weedy, dank. It's a beer that begs for a great burger or a greasy slice of pizza or onion rings or all the bar food you can imagine. It's just such a good beer. And this one is a little bit hazy. It's definitely East Coast, West Coast. This is just a little bit of that hazy, citrusy bite. Just enough to let you know that it's definitely an East Coast beer. But man, Block 15, this is a run for your money.